This is Weights and Wealth, your one-stop shop for entertaining education on building a stronger body and bank account.
We are not doctors or financial advisors and must warn you this is not medical or investing advice. It is for your entertainment.
Welcome back to Weights and Wealth. You may notice that we have a third host now. So this is our friend Sean Doyle, homeschool genius. So he's not maybe as much of a subject matter expert compared to Nick or myself in specifically the weights or the wealth, but he's interested in both, and he's very knowledgeable about a lot of topics, especially one of our 5 F's, I would say the faith F. So we figured it'd be a good idea to bring him in, and if you guys really don't like him, we can cut him back out. So we'll just see how it goes. Our shout out for this episode goes to Chloe from Charleston, South Carolina. She said, "I listened to this podcast during my workout, and this is the perfect pod for girls who have dad issues. I've never gotten so much good advice in my life. They're such dads." Crying emoji.
Nice.
All right, Sean, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So like Ted said, I have absolutely no qualifications in any of these fields. So if you're going to listen to anyone, don't listen to me. I'm just here to kind of riff, add some variety to the conversation, and then, contribute where I can. I think me and Nick both lift more than the fitness expert, so it's kind of ironic. But I'm sure that Nick is doing better financially than me and Ted. So
I don't know about that.
He's kind of OP.
Nick is not in the army like Sean and I, so he's got a leg up on us.
Yeah. But, college degree, Notre Dame, married, baby on the way. So life is good.
I didn't know Madison was pregnant.
Oh, really?
No.
Well, pregnancy announcement for all 300 followers and Nick as well.
Nick as well, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we'll just jump right into our intro article for the day. Recently, there have been, now as of maybe 2 days ago, Maine joined with Colorado in trying to take Trump off the ballot. So this is, I think, very predatory and a road we don't want to go down for elections. I'm not sure if one of you guys has more to add on it, but essentially what they're trying to do is use the 14th Amendment, I think, or the 13th Amendment. 14th, to say that because of Trump's insurrection, it's in the 14th Amendment, they provided a clause that says anyone that was an insurrectionist cannot run for president because they didn't want the Confederates that rebelled against the Union to run for president. So they're trying to use that clause to not allow Trump to run for president, which I don't know. I think it's a big stretch.
Yeah. I mean, Sean and I were talking about this before we started, and I personally just see it rallying Trump's base even more, like, because they love this kind of stuff, how he's like anti-establishment and all that. And I just kind of see it garnering more support for him. And I also don't see it actually holding up.
Yeah. So if you look at all the indictments against Trump that add up to 400 years in prison, this trumped up charges against him.
Wow.
What it wound up doing is he spiked in the polls compared to DeSantis. At that point, before all the indictments happened, they were relatively even. What was it, like last spring? So he does have a very strong core base that, as Nick said, really feeds off the government going against Trump kind of narrative.
I mean, to be fair, DeSantis didn't help himself with his weird shoes and talking like a robot. So I don't know. I've never seen anyone more awkward on a debate stage other than Jeb Bush. So
did you see? I think it was like the first debate. DeSantis, every time he would say something, he would end and then he would kind of pause and slowly bring a smile to his face. It would be like
It's very robotic.
He would talk, making his point. It was so weird.
It's like the visual form of please clap. It's so cringeworthy. But I mean, to play devil's advocate, the administration that's in power right now took over during the January 6th. So they're very, very threatened by this thing that had never really happened before, at least at the national level. You see it happen all the time at state level. I mean, and I think Washington or like Portland, during BLM, state capitol is routinely being occupied. It happens all the time on college campuses. Like students do a sit-in, or some climate activist who's depressed about the weather in 50 years glues themselves to the road. Like occupations like that happen all the time, but it's not at the scale and
I think the biggest issue that leads to something like January 6th is that the votes take so long to count in America. Yeah. If you look at other countries, it's not uncommon for their votes to all be counted in the next day or two after the election. It's a very quick process. For some reason, going back to the 2000 election, it's this drawn out process where it takes 2 months to figure out who the actual president is going to be. And that decreases voters' confidence in the actual results, I think. So Agreed. I think if that could be fixed, it would go a long way towards making people more confident in the election results being fair and just.
When was electronic voting introduced?
I have no idea.
Was it 2000?
I don't know.
Because Bush Gore was the first, who won that people can remember. I mean, I don't know. I know that Lyndon Johnson, I think, had a kind of midnight return in Texas. He was from Texas, right?
Yes, he's from Texas.
Yeah.
There's always been stuff like that, like Harry Truman, right? He's got the newspaper that says Dewey won. Yeah. So, the drawn out process of it taking 2 months to be counted up, I think, is what decreases people's confidence. And then also these articles that are coming out where Maine and Colorado aren't even going to let Trump run like that. That decreases people's confidence. And then also, I know RFK was having a lot of problems where it's costing millions of dollars for him to get on ballots in different states. And that doesn't seem like a very democratic process if it's that hard to even get your name on the ballot. It's kind of ridiculous. And then further, within the Democratic primary, the DNC was making rules where if RFK or anyone went into the state of New Hampshire before the primary, then the electoral votes they got wouldn't count, or the delegates that they won for the convention wouldn't count. But we've seen before that the DNC kind of rigs their side anyway. Like Bernie should have gotten the nomination, and then all the super delegates flooded in and voted for Hillary. So, but the whole process just seems to not be democratic at this point.
Yeah, I'm curious. Is the Republican National Committee, do they have entirely different rules than the Democrats?
Yeah. Because the DNC is the one that nominates the candidate, whereas the Republican is much more democratic, ironically.
Yeah, so in the Republican Party, the way the delegates work is each state has delegates that vote based off the results, whereas the DNC, they have that to an extent, but then they also have hundreds of super delegates that vote based off donations, basically. So, it's a weird system, and the parties can make up whatever rules they want, which makes it even weirder. But maybe third party eventually will.
Isn't RFK the only presidential candidate that's been denied Secret Service protection?
Yeah. He's had a really tough time getting it, and I don't think he has yet.
Yeah, we talked about that in August or September, I think, how RFK is still being denied Secret Service protection. He's the only candidate with over a certain percentage that's I mean, other candidates like Obama had it over 500 days out from the election. And we're within a year here, and RFK still doesn't have it. And there's been multiple attempts on him already. So, I don't know. The government is definitely being weaponized against certain candidates. Which
It's just really odd behavior. And part of me wonders whether it's always been like this. And because of the internet, now we can actually see it and comment on it. Everybody's got a voice. I mean, three weirdos have a podcast that for some reason people listen to. And then, you can go on Twitter and shout into the void as much as you want. And as long as you put enough hashtags, someone's probably going to see it eventually. So how much of this weirdness has always been how it's run, and now there's just more light in the room? And then how much of it is actually, it's getting worse. Mm-hmm. And we're just aware of it. And so now, we're like, oh, this is fine. I don't know.
Should we move on to the wealth topic for today?
Sure.
All right. Nick, you want to take us away here?
Yeah. So today the topics are investment and food quality. And this is not financial advice. We'd just like to say that. So Sean, I asked Ted this the other day, so he has the answer. But what would $100 in the S&P in 1928 be worth today?
So if you invested it in 1928... Gosh, I mean, that's like...
What was your guess, Ted?
What was my guess? I don't want to say it because I don't know if I'm going to remember my guess or what you said it actually was. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like 15% a year, right?
I think I said...
It's a little under that, but...
Okay. I think I said like 80 or 100,000, which was way off.
A little off.
If that was way off, I'll say 180.
It's about 830,000.
That's the magic of compounding interest.
Yeah, and that's not adjusted for inflation, but it's still a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a good chunk.
So I'll just go through like the different asset classes. We'll start with cash and cash equivalents. This is not risky at all, but you also don't make anything on it. This is where you park your money, if you got to use it within a couple years. And then we also got commodities. I know Ted's big on the metals, the gold, the silver. But this also includes things like gas, oil, and coal. They have a better return than your cash, but still not as good as like an equity, which is your riskiest and performs at about 10% every year, which at a younger age, that's where I park all my cash, just because, I'm not really worried about like a short-term fluctuation. And then real estate, it varies a lot, but it performs about on par with the stock market. It's a little under it, but pretty close.
Is it more or less volatile in the stock market, or does it depend on the market?
It's less volatile overall, but it can really vary because it's more of like a regional type thing, whereas like the stock market's national. So within the real estate field, it can vary a lot.
We've mentioned before with the metals, the gold and the silver, how it doesn't increase in value like stocks do, but then whenever something crashes, it goes way up. And we went through The Changing World Order by Ray Dalio and how that showed that you only really want a small percentage of your portfolio to be in gold, just to have in case something bad does happen, it will spike up. But like you said, it's not going to give you the return of a stock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and gold also has much higher transaction costs, which is something that people don't really figure when calculating the rate of return. So that's another thing just to keep in mind. Mm-hmm. That's all I have for investment quality. It's pretty simple. Just S&P 500 and run with that.
Yeah. So what's like a general percentage that people might want to hold in index funds in terms of their general portfolio?
Index funds, I mean, for your average investor, like 100%. I know Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger weren't big on that because they actually look into companies and evaluate them and try to figure out where they'll make the most. But for your average investor who doesn't know that, that's why index funds are there.
Yeah, and they would say, there's several quotes of them saying, for the average investor, index funds are the best idea, even though they would sometimes pick and choose because that's their
job.
Yeah. But for the average person, a low cost index fund it's hard to beat. So stop gambling and just do an index fund. So yeah, I like your point about 100% because a lot of times if you look at different formulas of how much of your portfolio should be in index funds, it might say 70 or 80%. But for our audience, for like young people, maybe 20 years old that just entered the workforce, 100% in index funds, it's hard to go wrong with that because it's just going to increase in value over time.
If you're holding it for 40 years, I personally don't see the point in having any bonds or fixed income. But once you get older, that's a good way to adjust the risk downward.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you dollar cost averaging that in like $100 a week, or are you waiting for like a I don't know, 3 to 5% drop?
I mean,
July?
It's hard to time the market, and a lot of the times, like if you took your money out at the start of 23 because you thought that the market was about to go down, you would have missed out on it's been up like 25% this year. Yeah. So dollar cost averaging is definitely the way to go.
Have you looked at your TSP at all this year?
I probably looked at it 3 months ago. So it's been doing decent. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's up 21% for us because 2023, even though everyone was panicking about there being a recession, 2023 was actually a really good year for stocks and for the market. So the problem with pulling out and trying to time the market is that you're almost always going to miss these big increases back up after a decline. So we've talked about that before too, but trying to time the market, not a good idea for most people.
Yeah, because the market average is about 10%, but it'll go up 30, down 15. So if you miss that up 30, then you're not going to be averaging the 10%.
Yeah. And another thing you can look at, this is what I do for the dollar cost averaging. I look at the fear greed index on Wall Street Journal. And once it starts to go down more towards fear and people are more afraid, that's when I invest a little bit more. And when everyone's feeling greedy and the prices are going up, I dollar cost a little bit less. So I try to time it. I do try to time it a little based off the fear greed index and doing opposite of what people are feeling. It can be really hard to force yourself to do that because if everyone else is feeling fearful of the market, like in 2023, it's hard to not buy into, oh, there's going to be a recession, stock market's going to go down. But if you're a long-term player, it doesn't really matter.
I agree. And like it with index funds, even blue chip equities, like you got to think about it. It's 20-year dollars on the line. You're not paying your rent with your portfolio. It's that money's gone, regardless of whether it goes down 20% tomorrow and up 50% tomorrow. Ridiculous gains. You're not going to be pulling that out and using it unless you're like a full-time day trader. So for a guy that's got a normal job with a steady paycheck, just put it in, forget about it as often as possible. Yeah. So, I mean, at least that's what I would do.
Should we move on to weights?
Yeah.
All right. So heard a little bit about investment quality. We're going to move on to food quality. If you guys are hearing are you guys hearing this in your headphones? The little crackling?
Yeah.
We'll see if we can figure that out in post editing. I'm not sure if that's just. All right, we are back. Our soundboard disconnected for some reason. We don't really, it was just sitting there, but it must have gotten bumped, or a cord must have gotten bumped, but we are back now. So we'll jump into the weights. So as far as food quality goes, the best way to ensure that you're getting good quality from food is to eat whole food sources. We're going to skip over the basics here because we've talked about eating a whole food diet several times before. But within a whole food diet, as always, the best diet is one that you can stick to long term. So if it is too restrictive for you and you go off the rails and you binge and then you're not eating whole foods anymore because you couldn't handle the restrictiveness of the diet that you were on, then that's not the best diet for you. So whether you're doing 80-20 whole foods, processed foods, or you're cooking all your own food and then socially you'll consume other food, or you prefer keto, whatever you can do, as long as you can stick to it, that's going to be the best diet for you. We can go into meat versus animal sources of food and how that impacts food quality next, if no one has anything to add in there.
I mean, it's super simple. Just find the food that you like and then cook it yourself. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, you like hamburgers? There's nothing wrong with hamburgers as long as they're like real hamburgers and not from McDonald's.
Yeah.
It's there really is not a lot of food other than maybe like orange chicken, which I love, which is like inherently unhealthy and like will never be good for you. Just because there's so much, like even in homemade orange chicken, it's still got, all the breadcrumbs and stuff like that. So unless you're going to make your own bread and then let it get stale and then crush it up, it's like, it would be such a process, and then make your own orange marmalade, which
usually you're going to buy that from the store. It's going to have all kinds of preservatives and artificial sugars or corn syrup in it. So it can be hard to get around stuff like that. Yeah. But yeah, generally 100%. If it's a whole food, there's not going to be a whole food that's bad for you, because it doesn't really make sense that something that we're supposed to eat would be bad for us.
Yeah. So eat your burgers. That's all I'll say.
As far as meat and animal sources go compared to plant sources of foods, typically your meat sources are going to have more micronutrients in them. So if you look at, I've done a post before on Ted's Lift Help that compares an egg to all these different kinds of vegetables. And to get the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals that are found in one egg, you have to have several cups of different types of greens and different kinds of nuts. And just to get the same micronutrients, you'd have to eat so much more food than just one egg. So meat, eggs, dairy, these things have much higher quantities of vitamins and minerals. So when you look at food quality, the nutrients that you're getting from your quality, you really want to be eating animal foods if you can. I know some people don't like meat. I think this is a bigger issue typically for girls than guys that don't like either the fat that comes with meat or some of the different connective tissue kind of grosses them out sometimes. But you can still eat meat and find fillets or do ground beef and have eggs and still get those nutrient-packed animal protein-dense foods.
What do you say to the people who don't like eating meat for animal welfare?
So for that can be a tough issue. So if you find a regenerative farm like White Oak Pastures in Georgia, those animals live the best lives possible. They're free range out in the fields. If you go to White Oak Pastures Instagram, you can see all the videos they have of all these animals if you can't go in person. We used to live right next to them down in Georgia. But if you go to the farm, you see that these animals are having great lives. And bigger than that, if you don't want to eat animal foods for animal welfare, and you instead want to have everything that's made out of soy and corn, which is what you're going to be doing a lot of times on like a vegan diet, those are worse for animal welfare because to produce the amount of soy and corn that's needed for that kind of a diet, you have to monocrop huge areas of land. And monocropping, having just one crop take up an entire area, is not a very natural way to farm. And you have to use a bunch of pesticides and herbicides and everything, and you're going to kill hundreds of thousands of smaller animals. So I don't know what's better for animal welfare. Killing one cow that had a really good life out eating grass, or killing and injuring 100,000 squirrels, birds, worms, and other critters.
Yeah, because like when those big combines go through, they kill everything that's on the ground.
Yeah, and the soil gets incredibly depleted of nutrients. So that goes into food quality as well. When we monocrop land, the nutrients, the vitamins and minerals that are in these crops decline over time, and you get these crops that have like they might be the same size as crops from fields that aren't monocropped, but they have less vitamins and less minerals in them. So the quality of the food you're eating is declining when you're eating food from conventionally farmed sources. And this also happens with meat. If you're eating meat that's coming from conventional farming, where the cows or the chickens are just lined up in cages, the nutrient quantity or the food quality is going to decline in that situation compared to an animal that's eating an appropriate diet, a cow that's eating grass all of its life compared to soy cakes and microplastics and like feed. Is the grass-fed cow is going to have more nutrients in that, and I think it's in a different episode. Yeah, it's in a episode that we'll be recording later today, where we go through the actual percentage decline in micronutrients in conventional farming versus more of a natural farming.
Yeah, I just like thinking about like a vegan bodybuilder eating 10 pounds of kale a day to hit, he probably supplements with pea protein, and like I can't imagine the amount of pea protein you have to eat to get 240 grams of protein in a day. But it's just kind of funny to think about the amount of vegetation that you would have to consume to like be a performance athlete.
How much would you have to poop? Like,
I don't know. I mean,
5 times a day.
Just got an efficient system.
Yeah.
In and out.
The other thing after nutrient quantity is bioavailability. So when we look at animal food sources versus plant sources, a lot of times the bioavailability, or the ability of your body to absorb that nutrient, is decreased in plant foods. So iron is a classic example. You have heme iron, which is really only found in animal foods. Think heme, blood, right? So you have heme iron, and then you have non-heme iron, which you might find in leafy greens. Well, the heme iron is about 25 to 30% of the heme iron is going to be absorbed by your body in your intestine. But if you look at your plant sources, the iron in leafy greens, non-heme iron, your body's only going to absorb 1 to 10% of that iron. So if you take vitamin C while you eat non-heme iron, that's one way to increase the bioavailability. But basically, even though a cup of spinach and an egg, I wrote down what it actually was. Let's see. We've got, there's one egg has the same amount of iron as, can't find it, but I think it was like 2.5 cups of spinach or kale or something. So even if those have the same amount of iron, your body's not going to absorb as much of the iron from the plant source. So this is another reason why eating animal sources to get micronutrients is going to be a lot more effective.
Just seems more efficient too. Like you have to eat less. You know, I'd rather eat 1 egg than 2 cups of spinach.
I found it's 2.5 cups of kale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just seems less time consuming.
So bioavailability, again, is just the ability of your body to absorb that nutrient. And it's generally much higher in animal food sources than in plant food sources. And then we went over iron. We can go over folate as another example so that you're not just saying, oh, Ted, you only gave me one example. Maybe that's not how it is for all the different micronutrients.
Every other vitamin is different.
So we covered micronutrients a lot more in depth in our micronutrient mega episodes. Part 1, vitamins, and part 2, minerals. This is the episode where you can see Nick just anguishing from my monologue, but that was episodes 25 and 26 or something like that. So if you're interested in micronutrients, check out those episodes. But when we look at folate is vitamin B9. A lot of the B vitamins have names that we use, niacin, riboflavin. So B9 is folate. Now, a lot of people don't really get a lot of folate. So folic acid is a synthetic version of the vitamin that's sprayed on crops, and it's used to fortify our foods. So you'll see in the store fortified with folate, right? So they use folic acid to do that. The problem is folate and folic acid are not the same thing. And this gets into the bioavailability argument where you can get your folate, real vitamin B9 from animal foods, or you can rely on fortified grains and cereals for folic acid, which your body isn't going to use as much of. Your body converts folate into, it's called 5-MTHR, which is like the version of folate that your body actually uses. It converts it when you digest it. Folic acid doesn't directly convert to 5-MTHR. So if you're getting folic acid, it's not the same thing as getting folate, right? So it's just like that heme iron, 25 to 30% absorbed, and non-heme iron, 1 to 10% absorbed. So another reason to do animal products.
Is there anything like with the vitamin C you're talking about with the iron that you can help it absorb with B9, or is it kind of just it's over?
Yeah, so folic acid, from what I've seen, it's more of whether or not you have a gene that helps with the conversion. So different micronutrients, there's different things that you can eat at the same time, which is again why it's always better to eat whole food sources that have those substrates in them instead of trying to supplement with one specific thing that might not be absorbed if it's not whole food form with other nutrients at the same time. But if you have a MTHFR gene mutation, which I have, and about maybe up to 40% of the population has, it means you're going to struggle to methylate different forms of vitamins. So this is, if you've taken organic chemistry, you know what I'm talking about.
I don't know what that means.
This couch does not know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't even know how to spell that.
So if you can't methylate different compounds, you're not going to be able to convert them into the forms that your body needs. So if you do have the MTHFR gene mutation, taking methylated B vitamins is probably going to be a good idea. You're probably going to feel a lot better. But if you do have the MTHFR gene mutation, it's going to be a lot harder to convert folic acid into 5-MTHR. So people with the MTHFR gene mutation might have elevated homocysteine levels, which has a very negative effect on heart health and increases blood pressure because they can't convert that folic acid into the form that their body uses. So if you have the MTHFR gene mutation, adding folic acid can actually negatively impact your health, which is just another reason to not consume all these processed grains.
Are there certain populations that this gene is more prevalent in, or is it, because I know that with some things like vitamin D, different ethnic groups have different requirements, and they're like,
Yeah, your pale Irish skin.
yeah, so like
requires-
I absorb all of it, you know, but other people might not. Is there certain groups that should be on the lookout for this?
I do not know if the MTHFR gene mutation has some sort of ethnic tie to it, or if it's just a random gene mutation. I have no idea. That's a really good question. We will look into that and follow up on that. But you can do a genetic test for maybe, I don't know, $100, $200, $300 and find out if you have these gene mutations.
Okay, but you said like a sign of it is generally like heart problems in the family.
So the best way to test for it, if you don't do a genetic test, is a simple blood lab. You can look at homocysteine levels.
Homocysteine.
If you have elevated homocysteine levels, that's an indication that maybe one of the issues that's leading to the elevated levels could be a MTHFR gene mutation, where you're not properly methylating and converting these compounds into the forms that your body actually uses.
Okay. And wait, isn't, like, I heard some speculation that folic acid is one of the large reasons why gluten is demonized now, because it's on everything that contains gluten?
Yeah, it's hard to say because glyphosate is also on pretty much all gluten-containing foods, unless it's organic. And atrazine is another pesticide that's used. So it's hard to know.
Is that the turn the frogs gay?
Turn the frogs gay. For those that didn't get that, the famous Alex Jones clip of him screaming, "They're turning the frogs gay," was atrazine in the water, a study that was done on like 29 frogs, where when atrazine, a pesticide that is commonly used, was in the water with the frogs, it actually turned them, it changed their sex.
Right?
I think it changed their sex. And they were able to have, like, male frogs in the tank were actually able to have babies. So atrazine is still commonly used and is found in your drinking water. So
Filter your water.
filter your water.
Unless you like that. I don't know.
That's all we've got today for food quality. But what it comes down to for food quality is your animal sources are going to usually have better bioavailability for the micronutrients and going to be higher in quantity in micronutrients. So if you're trying to get your vitamins and minerals, it's a good idea to include some meat and eggs in your diet. All right, we will see you next time. And if you liked having Sean here with us, let us know. If not, I guess maybe we'll cut him from the show.
I'll be the new Jamie. I'm not a good camera guy, though.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us today at Weights and Wealth. And don't forget to apply today's lessons to live healthy and wealthy.
If this conversation will contribute to your fitness and financial gains, please share it with a friend or family member and give a 5-star review so more people can lift bigger weights and get bigger bank accounts.